I've got a number of questions and thoughts which I'm going to open up the conversation with, but if you want to add something, then when I say just wave a hand in the air and we'll get a bit of that as well. So if we can come back together, that's great. Just an interesting one that I think is emerging. Chun-Yin has said, do we really want smart cupboards, smart beds? How do we start a meaningful conversation about what we as a society want from robotics? And if that isn't happening, do we need one? So just because we could is not necessarily because we want to. Who would like to respond to that challenge? Stefan.
I mean, maybe I can start, and I think, I very much wanted to kind of spark these thoughts, because even though I'm coming from the technical side, I think all of us as a society, we have to start this dialogue. Now, how it starts, I don't know either. I would guess to some degree market forces will somewhat tell what products might work and what won't. But I'm not too much an expert, and I definitely hope we can have a dialogue beyond that. I mean, I would have thought that the kind of home automation is less controversial, is on the kind of useful end of the spectrum, whereas other, maybe of the more futuristic ones, are more controversial when it comes to, for instance...
I suppose so that actually going to the fridge and taking the beer out is part of my sensory life experience.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, someone just passed, by the way. When are we going to have a robot that can pick up their children's toys at the end of the day?
Whether we are going to have that?
Yeah. Give me a date. Before 2037. It's getting desperate in the household.
I think you might have to wait 10 years or more for that to happen.
Okay.
And hopefully the robot can then also teach your kids how to not let things on the floor.
And if they don't,
won't just clear up the mess.
Can it do that?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay. Alessandro, just whether you've got a response to this question, is just because we can, where's the discussion going about what usefully enhances our quality of life as opposed to just because we can?
Yeah, I think I want to actually follow up on what Stefan was saying. It's really important in a situation where we need to have this personal assistant in the home, so for old people, for instance, right? So having automation in the home that can help old people doing, supporting the daily activity is really going to be more and more essential. So we are a society where actually age is, so the population is increasing in age, and the problem exists, and it will develop more and more. So having the ability of such intelligent support in domestic environment or sort of healthcare environment and so on are really, truly essential. So what is a general commodity that everybody will need it to have because they have to say they have it? That is just the market is going to dictate the kind of changes.
Okay. For those of us who are not steeped in this world, there's always this question about the sort of robots taking over in future and the kind of Terminator scenario, and I can see it. I mean, these things are sussing me out, and it wouldn't take much of a flip for them to be in control. Is that discussion taking place, or is that just, am I reading too much 2037 science fiction?
Yeah, I think actually I really want to advocate that really all this technological advancement has to be driven to improve people's life and not taking people's life, not taking life away from people. So really, for instance, in my examples before, all the decision support and realized by intelligent machines are not because they replace the human activity, but it's because they help human in seeing things that maybe they can't do because there is a much quantity of data to deal with, so this large quantity of knowledge to process. So this can only just improve. We shouldn't be worried that it's replacing us, or it's taking over.
But that's a lovely world full of people who have positive intent. There have been other inventions through science that have actually taken us in different directions. Stefan, and also Marco, maybe a comment on that. You may just want to just move your microphone so it's supporting. That's it. That'll help. Yeah. Okay. Stefan first, then Marco.
Yeah, so maybe just to add a little bit on that thought, I think still technologically we are really quite far away from this truly human level of intelligence as well as embodiment of intelligence in an actual machine that is as versatile as a human. So in that sense, I'm not as afraid as other people are. I think today's robots are still quite stupid in the end. That having said, this is my opinion, and some respectable roboticists see it differently. So it's definitely a dialogue that we are having. And in fact, you can today build machines that are really scary when it comes to military applications. These machines don't have to make sensible predictions about us and how to interact. They just have to kill. And you can build really scary machines where I think we have to have a very serious discussion to the point of, setting the boundaries via Geneva Convention kind of thing. So again, I think it really depends on what part of robotics are we talking about and what kind of threats that there are. I think there are some that are quite real. Others, when it comes to just entering our everyday lives and completely taking over, I'm less worried about that part. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have the conversation.
Marco, do you want to add a thought here?
Just going back, to your original question, and in the Dyson School, we have research in robotics, and based on kind of content and discussion we have had, we've seen an interest from companies that provide services in large cities to try to kind of automate some of the operation. So, for example, last mile delivery, they're thinking about trying to kind of use robots for that. So I would say that there is an interest out there. I don't know whether it's backed up by kind of any kind of market evidence, but there are companies that are making steps in that direction.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Another question coming in: kind of where's the pace being set? Is it being set in tech firms that are doing stuff, or is it in academic institutions? You're bound to say it's academic institutions with Imperial at the head of it, but be objective for a moment. Where are you sensing that you read the mags and all the rest of it? Where's the real thrust and drive taking place? Who wants to offer me? And Alessandra.
Well, there is clearly a lot of activity in the industrial sector. So, with the objective of really developing a new systems of applications, which is really for their own personal business purposes. But I do think, and at the same time, there's also a lot of activity happening in universities. So we are really quite at the edge of that. And really, the success, in my view, has to be really in the collaborations between the two, because we can go very much ahead in our theory, in our research, but actually we would like to demonstrate that in the real world problems, and companies want to have the real world problem in their hands, and vice versa. A company might not have enough, let's say, sort of research development organization to be able to know what is outside in academia. Right. So I think the thrive is to come from both directions.
Okay. Just whilst you're on, Alessandra, the top scorer in our answer the question, apart from the one which says, will the slides be circulated? I think it's the only question to which we can give a definitive answer this afternoon. And the answer is yes. You will be emailed with a thank you following the conference, which will have a link to the slides, so you can look at strange robots doing weird things to your heart's content. But going back to your presentation, you had the Helen example and the scenarios, and there's a question saying, what was Helen actually adding? It seemed that Mimi made her redundant. Can you just rehearse that? Maybe this is a reinforcement of things, it's just because we can. What's the point?
I think it wasn't at all. It wasn't at all intention to show that Mimi, that Ellen is redundant. Actually, it's the intention to show that Mimi is not really able to understand what is the best thing to do for Helen unless Helen can communicate that to the system, to the applications. So maybe the examples about the software engineering, the software debugging, and things like that could be something that can be automated. But ultimately, there has to be a general opinion and decisions by the human being. So all these three scenarios really rely very much on the success if the human being is at the center of it. So in the first case, when actually it's able to provide suggestion for Helen and not for any person, and then when the second case, when it's able to certify, support Helen in deciding whether it is a right correction to make in the software, so they can provide the support in the decision making. And in the third examples, they can also give guidelines and extra information that Helen is not allowed, not aware of, but Helen ultimately decides what to do.
Right, okay. Just another one. A lot of the examples and maybe the work you're doing, I can see that we are going to get rid of every hotel person who makes beds, cleans the rooms, all the rest of it. Zzz, all wonderful first world problems and issues, and get my beer and all the rest of it. We are on the brink of a global crisis. 10 billion people. We have a crisis of climate change, water, goodness knows, feeding the population, all sorts of issues. This feels as though this could just make those of us, who have the wealth, have some more gizmos, lifestyle, and life becomes even more fun with fewer people employed. Can you give us a sense as to whether there is research, discussion about how this really maybe bites in with some of the compelling crisis issues that are facing society, particularly in less developed countries? Can anyone offer me some encouragement that this isn't just a new toy because we can?
I think, first of all, I want to agree with that concern, absolutely, and it's possibly a discussion that we as roboticists, being part of, that it might not be part of our job as much, so we maybe don't have it enough. That having said, I still think, though, that robotics also has a lot of potential. Generally, technology has a lot of potential to also address some of those issues quite directly with things like automation in agriculture, when you're talking about feeding the world population. So this is a real challenge that we have right now, that we could definitely benefit from robotic tools, from learning, understanding. Now it becomes a problem of really distributing it all around the world. And I guess that's not only a problem for such technologies, it's generally a problem of distribution of wealth. Now again, that's a broader political discussion, and I'm not sure I'm the expert of having it, but I definitely encourage everyone to have it, because the problem of the crisis is real. I agree with that.
Right. Does anyone want to add?
Well, I just wanted to follow up in the example of the agriculture and then the developing world. So one of the collaboration discussions I have, for instance, at Imperial is with also companies. Can we develop this cognitive system that they can actually help learning, work out, for instance, a new way of doing, making plants more resistant to certain type of climate changes. And of course, in order to get to that point, you need to have this complexity in the system. They are able to understand what is the current knowledge about the genetic in plants, and be able to monitor at the same time. So robotics or sort of flying robots will be able to understand and take images and process these images and help work out the impact a certain type of treatment on plants that could help or not help in different climate conditions. So there is a lot into it that we can do if we actually are able to integrate all these different technology for the purpose, for the goods of human beings. So.
Okay. All right. Opening up, I have this technology. I've got lots more questions, but this is a multi-channel conversation. If you feel you've got a question and you want to shout it out and you've got the voice to do it, just put a hand in the air and I will come to you. Fortunately, a microphone won't come to you, but if you think, I want to say something, just stick a hand in the air. Otherwise, I shall continue with some fascinating questions that are emerging here. How can symbolic learning cope with fake news?
They can actually understand what does it mean, fake news.
That's right, yes.
That's what we start with.
Whoa, there we are. Who asked that question? I don't know where you are. Anonymous. Love it.
So
interesting.
We can actually, this is interesting because I was in a talk in Germany. There is a big lab in the US called the Red Hand, where they're actually collecting tons of video clips about the BBC, the US news, the CNN news, and so on. And there is a lot to study of what does it mean, a multimedia in a frame. And if you're able to understand this, there's tons of data, but nobody really can label this data, right? So if you're able to understand what does it mean, a multimedia frame, how people communicate the news and so on, in a very more general, abstract manner, we should be able also to use data to label this data, work out what is fake from not fake.
Right, okay. I'm just interested also, I mean, this gathering is saying, hey, 2037, so we're giving ourselves a bit of breathing space. I'm just wondering, two things. One, where can I go and, maybe all three of you, this stuff is actually happening, I'm seeing it, it is changing stuff. So first of all, a living, real example of what's going on that you think, that shows that it's useful stuff. And also, are we talking 2037, or is suddenly over the next 5 years just this quantum change towards the sort of things you're doing going to take place? So maybe first of all, can you point to something, as I look out of the window across London, that is beginning to really show a difference and create value? And secondly, are we 2037, or are we maybe sooner for that, for this tsunami of change to take place? Marco, start at the end there.
Right, I'm gonna take these questions, with the idea of a future in which robotics, will start to deploy within our society in a large city, and also trying to bring in my interest in designing experience and human factors, So I can see lots of challenges there. It's not, obvious how they will be tackled, some are kind of legal. I think, Stefan mentioned them earlier. Some are kind of, really related to understanding, what actual kind of, benefits they bring to the people. So I see quite, some elements of complexity that are really related to understanding, these interfaces and how we can make them work effectively. There's still kind of, some way ahead of us.
Okay, Stefan.
Okay, so talking about real-world examples, I think there are a lot relating to what I was talking about. For instance, autonomous driving, right, is something maybe not happening right now, as in you're actually allowed to let your car drive yourself around. But the technology is really getting there, and we see things like autopilots that may or may not be a good idea to use, but you can use some of that. That's the technology that is getting us there. There's drones, consumer-level drones that start to actually have these algorithms, these exact algorithms I was talking about, embodied in their brains, such that they can fly around, solve different tasks. It can be something like industrial inspection that you would see such devices used for, or just maybe even to take a selfie or to follow you around and shoot the video. I mean, these are actual products that are really getting there, and we will see more of those, and we'll see them to be more intelligent. Now, how fast it will happen is really difficult to say.
It was quite interesting. I was facilitating a conference, a German-American conference between Joey at Harvard, and they had the chief exec of General Motors, and they were predicting that by 2025, 50% of vehicles will be autonomous. We had the minister in charge of transportation and regulation, and they are putting in place regulations for cities, so we know who's responsible if there's a prang. So they're putting in place that stuff, and it seems almost unbelievable to many of us. But the industry appears to be going at an extraordinary rate on this. Alessandro, I just wonder a response to my question.
Yeah,
as well.
I think there are clearly examples nowadays, for instance, in London. I'm sure there's a lot of advancement in medicine. So all the different technology in image processing and with different type of machine learning algorithms, which are really helping there nowadays already. And going back to some of the example I was showing, so we are also starting to make a quite good progress in combining this deep learning with symbolic machine learning. So we're able now to understand a little bit better natural language processing. So the little scenario I showed before about the social network is actually something that is happening in my lab. So we're actually able to process and classify people who can be actually breaking privacy or not. and the confidentiality of the information. So this stuff will need to be in place to help people in the daily activity, and they are actually happening. But as you're saying, how fast we can go to reach really the vision of 2037 that we're depicting, that is just still an open question.
Right, okay. Yeah, just take a live question. You are, and you'll need to pretend you are on the platform at Stratford. You may want to stand, or is that an imposition? Okay.
So no, I'd just like to ask the panel a little question about continuous learning, because that was going to be part of the presentations. And I know we have it in respect to some consumer preferences, but in taking that somewhat further to some more significant, should we say, what progress is being made in developing a viable continuous learning methodology and process?
Right.
Yeah,
Alessandra?
So I think we are making, the kind of progress has been made from the theoretical and algorithmic point of view. So the kind of symbolic machine learning I was describing above, before in my presentation, they actually have this capability. We have demonstrated in various applications in software engineering, for instance, for software engineering, that we are actually able to evolve continuously requirement of software systems based on new evidence and concept and changes in the environment. So we've done, for instance, application adaptive systems. So like robots that move around in the environment and they have to continuously update the model they have about the environment as they explore it, in order to be able to understand what is the best actions in that case, right? So the learning there can be on two aspects. So it's a learning from the structural, conceptual point of view. So realize that there is something else, a new concept that the machine is not aware about, as well as a learning in adapting within the boundary of the models that the machine already has, right? So in the advancement in this continuous learning is be able to do both. Is to be able to do conceptual, structural, new knowledge based on new evidence, as well as adaptation within this new knowledge. So this is, I'm talking about a more quantitative adaptation, so understanding what is most likely or less likely and adjust some parameter in the models.
Makes sense?
Well, I'm not sure how I don't really understand conceptual learning in relation to, say, software development.
So for instance, adaptive systems, in order to be able to work in an environment, they have to have a model of the environment. All right? So this model can be hard-coded. So in adaptive software engineering, there's a lot of work on how the machine is able to continuously adapt what they think the environment is as they explore it. So, and the advancement that we have made is how we can learn structure, new models that are represented as a structural model, not just a quantitative probabilistic models.
This feels like a conversation to further develop over a cup of tea. Perfect. Now, we're just talking of tea, we're just about that. Oh, is that a quick one?
I'm not sure it's quick.
Go on then. You are?
Xavier, District 3 Innovation Center in Montreal. I was in Geneva last week, and I was very surprised to find out that the European Parliament is conceiving the electronic person, so that this whole liabilities of weapons and thing is giving to this new person, which is not a corporate person, not a human person, but this electronic person. I was wondering if you guys were, since you're in the field, are you involved with these legal people defining this person? Is it UK doing it?
Anyone want to offer a response? Stefan?
I must admit I'm not, but it would be good to have people from our side involved in these kind of conversations.
Anyone
But
else?
I want to add to that. I also read an article saying that at the European community level, they are pushing for legislations in which any decision that the machine is making has to be explained. Because of this big problem about who to make liable if something goes wrong, it actually will exist more and more. It will become bigger and bigger. So for instance, in my symbolic machine learning approaches, we are able to explain what the machine has learned and why it has gotten to that learning knowledge.
Right.
And I think this is vital. So even if there is an electronic person doing legislations and coming up with new legislations, this can be done in collaboration with experts. And provided that they are open box, they are clear what they're learning.
That's exactly what you're recommending.
Exactly.
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 The industry doesn't seem to like that one. So.
I know.
Big surprise. But
Yeah.
thank you very much indeed for that. We're right up against a cup of tea. I just wonder if I got one final message from each of you. In this audience are some of the great companies driving forward in the UK and internationally as Imperial business partners and others, trying to make sense of this world we're moving into. We're stretching to 2037. If there was a today message, watch this space, or some unusual thing we didn't expect you to say that might condition some of our thinking about this brave new world into which we're moving, what would that little message be? And if it can be no more than 2 sentences, you will be my friend for life. Marco.
Right. So we live in a world in which we have increasingly complex product systems, services, and we are good at developing the technology that's behind them, but we need to think more about how we create the experiences that are around these systems, and we need also to think about why people want them, why do they want to own, and how they own them.
Okay.
And by answering that, we can develop better interfaces.
Okay, Stefan, I'm still trying to get my own beer from the fridge. Convince these people that we should be listening to what you're talking about.
Well, I think it's think outside the box. In a lot of applications, we try to replace the human with a human-like robot, but that might not be the best solution to accomplish the task.
Okay, and finally, Alessandra.
So what I would say is my message is don't trust the machine that takes the decisions for you unless they're able to explain why they got to how they got to that decision.
Right.
So really my warning message is really we need to be much better in doing that automatically.
Buyer beware, some
Be
time
aware.
to come.
Yeah,
okay.
Just to be aware.
Okay, panelists, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our 3 speakers so far. Thank you very much. Just stay for a moment.